Hello everyone, welcome to Webtoon Book Club. Today's story is Save Me. Yep, we're finally getting, for once we actually have an actual story. Again, twice in a row. How unprecedented is that? But it is a pretty short-ish story. Only about 15 episodes, and those episodes aren't the longest read. Well, they're pretty modern. Which is something I forgot to mention with Cheese in the Trap, which was those episodes were long. Almost each of those episodes, which again was over 300, took me around 10 minutes to read each. Some of them even a little longer than that. There were a few that were a little shorter than that, but generally about 10 minutes per episode. So, for what was already a story that had an immense amount of episodes, it was also very long to read through as well. So that kind of gives you the idea of how long that story was. This one, on the other hand, not too many episodes, pretty moderate length per episode, but is an interesting story. So, we start with our main character traveling back to the hometown that he grew up in, where all of his circle of friends still are at. As a matter of fact, he ends up coming across one at a gas station and ends up having a bit of a conversation with him, and he asks about how everybody else is doing. And he says, and he gives the idea that it's just like everybody is fine, but some of them are facing problems. And then a few that he just has never heard from. So he goes back to his, I guess, motel, I think it is, or wherever. And then when he wakes up the next morning, he ends up finding the friend that he was talking to not too long earlier is now in jail. So he goes over to the police department to figure out what's going on, and he's talking to his friend, now behind glass. He finds out that it's like everybody is dead. All of his friends are now dead, or arrested, or just missing. And he's pondering how this could have happened so quickly. So what we find out is the friend that ended up getting put into jail, almost as soon as he left, another guy pulled up, and they ended up getting into a bit of a spat. Mostly the person that pulled up in his truck was not being great, was not being a good person. But because of how the friend ended up responding, and because how the guy ended up twisting around the situation, it was the friend that ended up getting arrested and going to jail. So, but once our main character steps outside the police station, he ends up finding there's a big crowd out there. And there's another one of his friends getting arrested over what is now another spat of some kind. So now all of his friends are just gone overnight. And he's just absolutely breaks down over this, wishing that he could change what could have happened, or somehow things could get fixed. And he ends up getting what he wants, as he ends up being transported back in time to the night before. And this is where the concept of the story gets put into play, which is that our main character is stuck in a Groundhog Day time loop. So, he starts off trying to save his buddy at the gas station and just tells him, get in the truck. And he's like, oh, I'm working right now. It's like, just get in. Trust me, just get in. We need to go find everybody else. So, his friend reluctantly gets in the truck. And then they drive off to go find others, but trying to locate them becomes problematic because they don't know where they're at. And then while they're driving down the road to the city, somebody ends up falling down onto their car, and when he gets out and he finds it was his friend. It was one of his other friends he was looking for. who is now dead. And from then, the time loop starts over. So every time he fails to save somebody, the time loop resets. So he needs to be successful to save all of his friends. So, more or less to generalize it, because it is a time loop, so we are experiencing the same day, the same night, over and over and over. And the events, more or less similar, again and again. So he knows how to save the friend at the gas station, but then it becomes problematic how to save all the others. So for the friend that fell down onto their truck, he jumped off a building. Another friend lit himself on fire in a hotel. And I think another friend ends up getting hit by a car on the road. But there's an issue with these. But there's an issue when it comes down to these three friends. Depending on the actions that our main character takes throughout that day. Yeah, throughout the several hours of time he has. The friend, all three of them will have a will be displaced by rather where and when, and even by the one case, how. So for the friend falling off the roof, it will be the exact same roof every single time, but when he jumps off, will change by, I believe, a duration of several minutes or so. Like, it's a short period of time. So he is more or less predictable. It's just about getting there at the right time. The other friend who catches himself on fire, he's a little bit more trickier because he doesn't go to the same location. He goes to, depending on how the events play out, he ends up going to a different location. But it's usually between the same 2 or 3 locations, and then again, it's just a matter of when. But then the friend that gets hit by a car, he becomes a little bit, turn this down. Whoops. Yeah. For him, it's a little bit more sporadic, as maybe he'll get hit by a car, or maybe he'll jump off of a bridge completely far away from where he would have gotten hit by the car. Or maybe he'll get hit by a car somewhere else, or maybe he'll get mugged or something. His differencing between events is very much more of a wild card. It is predictable. If the main character takes the same event, does the same actions throughout the time loop, up into that point, the same events will occur. So they do become predictable, but it is a trial and error of learning that predictability. So once he manages to get down to be able to save the 4, then comes down to the one who is actually locked up into a hospital. But why he's locked up into a hospital is because he's declared mentally crazy or something like that. And he really isn't. He may have lost his mind due to solitude a bit, but the reason he's there is because his mother doesn't want to have to take care of him anymore. So she's put him into a hospital so they can take care of him. But also give an excuse that he's crazy, don't let him out. So that night he's trying to escape, and and I can't remember if he ends up dying somehow, or if he gets caught and then transported to somewhere else or something. But regardless, all the friends end up going into the hospital and then breaking him out. Basically by grabbing him, rushing him out the door, shoving him in the truck, and then driving off. So once they're able to get him, after a few attempts in that matter, because several times that goes wrong, our main character thinks he has finally saved everybody. He has finally managed to do it. So he wakes up the next morning knowing that he managed to save all of his friends, and then sees the last friend getting arrested in a crowd. And it springs back to him that he completely neglected that incident. because he spent so much time trying to just save all the others that one night and trying to figure out how to go about doing that he completely neglected the event that happened the following day, which ends up just breaking him completely, as by this point he's essentially gone through this time loop possibly hundreds to maybe even thousands of times. As just like with the movie Groundhog Day, we don't see every single run through the loop. We see the initial first few or so to get an idea of what's going on, and then we essentially see the highlights of that time loop, of that going through the time loop, as the events are different and change, and new things are happening. So by the time he gets to where the last friend is being arrested out in the streets in broad daylight, he's by that point completely forgot about it, because he's spent so much time focusing on all the others. So this completely breaks him down, thinking that it's just completely hopeless to even try, that there's no way to actually be able to save everybody. But when he seems to have given up hope, there's a knock on his motel door, and it's all of his friends gathered together there to actually console and make him feel better. And he thinks that's just all he needed. Maybe this was the right time now after all, because for some reason they all decided to go visit him and instead of him going to them. But then we find that certain events still play out, and the loop resets again. And that's actually where the story ends. The story ends with him still stuck in the loop, not knowing if he can ever manage to get out of it, and not knowing if he can ever truly save all of his friends or not. It is an interesting story, and I do enjoy the leave off on the uncertain, and with an ending that isn't entirely happy, but just uncertain. It does call a lot. Obviously, being a time loop story, I believe it is structured in a similar manner to Groundhog Day, in the fact that it's like, you get to see what this time loop is, and how it's going to go about, and how it works. And then you basically just get to see the highlights from that point. And you kind of get the idea, as his personality and emotions are breaking down over time, that he's been going through this over and over and over and over again, just continuously trying to accomplish the goal. With, of course, the bigger difference being, instead of becoming a better person, he's trying to save everybody from dying or from ruining their lives or something, or having their lives ruined. And it's interesting to say the least. It is a very interesting story, and I do enjoy it very highly. I do recommend it very highly. You could probably finish this story in an afternoon, because it is such a quick read. Now, this is something that I wanted to mention that I have not, which is that Webtoon has done away with Daily Pass and has now made it all ad pass, or advertisement locked, or whatever. So now you have to watch an ad every single time you want to go in, which I'm not a giant fan of, because I don't think that was a great decision, but I kind of get it. So, trying to read through this story, yeah, you're going to have to sit through an ad every single episode, but that's kind of better than how it was. But that's kind of I think, the advantage and takeaway. Now, I don't know if the ads still have limits of how many you can unlock in a day, or if they're now unlimited. Compare that to before with the Daily Pass, where you did have the pass and you did have the ads as well, but there was a limit on those. So, I don't know if there's still a limit or not. So, if there isn't, that's kind of the takeaway, where instead of having to unlock one per day, you can now just read through the whole story in one afternoon. But that's really all I got. So, vote down below which story you would like me to talk about. The list of stories will be in the description. Pick which one is you would like me to talk about, and I will see you next time. Bye. That was the wrong button.